Right. So we learned that the 1978 Constitution sort of started the process um, which affected the democratic status of Sri Lanka pretty bad uh, in the 1980s. So some political scientists call this like a political decaying movement where democracy started decaying. And mainly this is because of the president's position. That president's position was really powerful that you guys saw uh, when we were studying the 78 constitution, we saw how powerful the president was. So much so that according to some political scientists, this is like a politically decaying moment of the Sri Lankan political history. However, we need to appreciate one thing about the 78 constitution. It introduced fundamental rights in a legally enforceable manner. So we consider that particular part as a good thing about the democratic governance in Sri Lanka under the 78 constitution. Okay, right. Aksa, continue. So let's see what happened to the democracy in Sri Lanka after that point.
However, the period which is generally identified as a democratic setback in Sri Lanka, according to political literature, also reflected an important feature as the resilience of democracy. This is due to the fact that, though through constitutional authoritarianism, a civil war, political violence, militarization, the democracy of Sri Lanka did not die. Although democracy, although democratic features were weakened, they continuously existed, and the people continued to have faith in democracy.
And
Next is
highlight
the
that part, huh? Highlight that part. So although you call this like a decaying movement, like decaying period of democracy in Sri Lanka, highlight this part or write in all caps. Democracy did not die in Sri Lanka. It did not die. Democratic features were weakened. Yes, right. Now, we had like a really bad period in the 80s. So much political violence, so many killings. Seeing a dead body on the road was something normal, right? But still, people kept believing in democracy. To give you a small example, when the Indolanka Pact was signed, right? Indolanka Peace Accord was signed. It established a provincial council system. So we had the JVP movement back then who were completely against the Indolanka Pact, saying it was like betraying the country and divide the country into pieces and all that. And they said basically voting in that election was something that you would get death penalty for, right? They would say they said that if you go contest in this election, you do duty for this election, or simply if you vote for this election, you will be punished with death. Not only that, in 1989, in the presidential election also, they went with the same stance. But still, in the presidential election, more than 50% of the people turn out to vote. There were like 300, 400 people who were daring enough to go vote and get killed. Like about 300, 400 people died for the fault of, casting their vote. Even with death threats, people still turn out to vote. Right? There were some areas it was less than 50 votes were casted. The areas uh, that sort of political violence were at a peak. But can you imagine that area being under the peak of like political violence, still turning out to vote, knowing that less than 50 people have turned out to vote, right? Because people still kept believing in democracy during these JVP problems, during LTT problems, during the Indian Army problems, right? During a civil war, no matter what happened, people still turn out to vote. People still turn out to political rallies. That's because people kept believing in the democratic system. People kept believing in the democratic governance. So even after that much of political decay, the democracy survived in Sri Lanka. It just the democratic features were weakened, but the democracy did not die. Okay, right. Aksa, continue.
regularly despite violence and malpractice, and governments regularly changed during a civil war in a reasonably peaceful manner. Even the public participation had elections and the voter turnout was reasonably high. Despite political violence, this reflected the faith people had in democracy. Eventually, a strong argument for democratic reforms emerged in the society, which later turned into a political movement. This movement included many political motives, most notably transforming the current governmental format into a cabinet format. Due to their influence since 1994, abolishing the executive presidency became a trending topic, a campaign slogan, as well as a main feature in policy papers of main candidates.
Right. Then you have the democratic experience, right? Is it Ketu? That's a part of.
Yes, sir.
So now,
Democratic and undemocratic features, sir.
yes. So now that we saw that in Sri Lanka, we have a very mixed experience, as we discussed in that note, that Sri Lanka has very bold features as well as very negative features in terms of democracy. Let's list them out, right? So I have left some space after those each point. So if you can just try to put an effort to write a small explanation by yourself in your words. So the next time when I'm having an individual class with you all can show me and I can tell you all what's missing in that. Okay, not necessary, but if you all understood, you'll be able to write a small explanation of each point, right? So let's take a look at the features. What are the positive features? What are the negative features of the democratic experience in Sri Lanka? Go ahead.
Sir, I have a warning. There might be a little bit of typos in my the note. Can you please tell me if there is?
Oh yeah, sure.
Sir?
I'll let you know. Okay, good.
Democratic and undemocratic features of the Sri Lankan system of governance. Following the British colonial era, the Sri Lankan political system evolved as a democratic political format since 1947. When we study the Sri Lankan system of government, many democratic as well as undemocratic features can be identified. Democratic features. Despite having periodic setbacks, retreats, and variations, the Sri Lankan system of democratic governance exhibits the following positive democratic features. Universal franchise and representative democracy, a legislature elected by the public. A cabinet government which is accountable to the parliament. Regular elections from time to time. Higher voter turnouts in elections.
There was a point called cabinet government, right? So
Yes, sir.
if you write an explanation, the cabinet government we had from 1947 to 1978 only. Yeah. So you just put within brackets, write that down. If you're writing a small explanation, include that we had a cabinet system from 47 to 78. And you can mention even after 78, we didn't like exactly break away from the Westminster system. It just we introduced a president. We still have at least a part of the cabinet which is responsible to the legislature. Okay. Right. Continue.
Regular elections. So I continue.
Sir, I didn't get that.
Oh no. Having a cabinet system is more democratic than having a presidential system. No. The fact that we had a cabinet system from 47 to 78 is a very bold democratic feature. And even after 78, we didn't really break away from the cabinet system entirely. We went into a hybrid system, which means we still have a half of the executive being responsible to the legislature. Understood?
Oh, yes, sir, I got it. Thank you.
Ketu, what about you?
No, sir, I didn't quite catch that.
Okay, now having a cabinet system is a democratic feature, right? Having a cabinet system is more democratic than having a presidential system like the US. So we had a cabinet system from 1947 to 1978. under the Salisbury Constitution as well as under the 72 Constitution. So it is a bold democratic feature that we had a cabinet system for a really long time. And even in 78, when we finally changed our constitution, we didn't completely abandon the cabinet system. Instead, we went into a hybrid system, which means at least half of the executive is a cabinet. So Prime Minister and the cabinet are responsible to the parliament, no? Understand? So it's a democratic feature that always in Sri Lanka, the executive has been responsible to the legislature. Before 78, the entire executive was responsible. After 78 also, at least half of the executive is responsible to the legislature.
Okay, sir.
Understood? Okay. Sure. And there was a point about like the voter turnout, right? So under that, you can include that, there were times there was political violence in Sri Lanka, which means there were death threats for people who turn out to vote. Even under death threats, we had the 50% plus voter turnout in Sri Lanka. You can include that. Also, you can include that in the very beginning in 1931, right after granting universal franchise also, we had a 54% voter turnout in the very first election. Which means Sri Lankan people like to vote. Sri Lankans love to vote because we are very fond of democracy. Even in 1931, when we had never heard of a concept called elections, 54% of the people came out to vote. And even in the 80s, when there were violence and when someone literally says, if you vote, you get killed, they were like, I'd rather take my chances and go vote and come. Because people were very fond of democracy. People like voting. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. Continue.
Regular elections from time to time, higher voter turnouts in elections, relatively independent judiciary, a multi-party system with two major parties and many smaller parties, considering the rule of law as a basic constitutional principle, fundamental heights, sir? Fundamental heights with constitutional rights.
Fundamental rights.
Fundamental rights with constitutional legal protection, devolution of power, the active civil society with active social movements, conscious existence of parliament democracy despite civil war, violence and setbacks, the uninterrupted faith of people in democracy as most preferred government. Undemocratic features. The executive presidential system and the excessive centralization of political power in the position of the president, the legislature and judiciary being dominated and influenced by the executive, the civil war and political violence, violation of the principle of free and fair election, militarization of state and civil society, the suspension of the general law and fundamental rights under the emergency law, violation and denial of human rights, corruption and abuse of power in governance. Sir, do I read Sri Lanka and its relevancy of democracy as well?
Yeah, I think Aksa read a lot, so you should read that part as well.
Okay,
Is
sir.
that part clear? Do you have any questions before moving on?
Hi, sir. Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's actually from the it's actually from the previous part which I read.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So now we were talking about Salisbury, right? Like we were talking about Salisbury and how like it was very democratic and stuff. But my question is, okay, two questions actually.
I think I know what you're gonna ask, but just go ahead.
Okay. Wasn't the Salisbury legislature really weak for one? And secondly, they had an independent public sector. So is that a democratic feature, or is that like that contributes towards a weak legislature in a way? So yeah.
Yeah. So for the first question, they had a very weak legislature, yes, but we rather look at the other side of that point. Why was it weak? Is because the constitution wanted to establish protection for minorities. Now, in terms of a political science perspective, we would say having a weak legislature is bad. But when you actually look at it, why was it so weak? Now, out of the 5 restrictions it had, most of the restrictions were there. Article 29, judicial review power, British Privy Council, all these things were there to establish protection for minorities. So it was for a good cause. And by limiting the power of the parliament, some protection for minorities were given, at least nominally, right? So we look at the other end of it. So comparing to the other 2 constitutions in terms of Salisbury, when we look at from a democratic perspective, it was much better, right? Because it shielded the minorities of the country. And secondly, the public sector, yes, it is a democratic feature. The fact that the public sector was free from political influences. But the thing is, we focus on bigger things in terms of democracy, like the minority protection, the voter turnouts, the political violence and stuff, because the public sector is more like towards the administration side. So it is democratic that the independent public sector being independent, but it's more of an administration related point. So we don't really talk about it when we talk about the democratic status of the country. We can, it's not incorrect to incorporate that, but it should come a little below in the list, because we should talk about minority protection and we have not having political violence during that time, not having a civil war at that time, and the ethnic conflicts, just being like pretty much like verbal and what do you call that, more like conceptual rather than actually the communities were attacking each other. Those things are the ones we normally give priority to, and the fact that the constitution didn't have fundamental rights. The public sector, you can include that as well. It was a democratic feature, but that's more connected to the administration area. Okay.
Also, the minority protection thing, since we're talking about Sri Lankan experience, can you also say, like, argue that it is in a way ineffective because there were so many like laws and stuff that.
I was actually wondering why you didn't ask this question. So I knew that you were going to ask this question at one point. Yeah, practically it wasn't actually implemented, right? But at least we focus on the fact that at least it was there. So at least for minorities to try, right? Now, so much so, what a constitution can, what a constitution can actually provide, right? I mean, the constitution can't really get involved in practical politics and execute whatever that's there. So the constitution did its job, provided minority protection. It just turned out to be that it wasn't practically implemented. But at least the 72, not like 72 constitution, minority protection clauses were there at least. Okay, so we consider that to be a democratic feature. And when you are writing the answer, you all may mention, it's perfectly fine to mention that, however, in practical, now when you're talking about the democratically positive things about Salisbury, is that the fact that there was minority protection and we didn't have much political violence. Ethnic conflict was just like, intensity. We didn't really have a conflict where, people were like going into violence and attacking each other. And politics was reasonably less corrupted, unlike these days. These things were the positive things. And negative things, the main negative thing you need to mention under Salisbury is that the fact that it didn't have a fundamental rights chapter. Other than that, you can mention also when it comes to the minority protection, although the steps were there, they weren't practically effective because actually some harmful laws were violated. And you all can really appear smart by mentioning actually it was that loophole which sort of created the turning point in mid 70s, because the minority protection, if the minority protection was properly given in the 50s and the 60s, the 70s wouldn't have been that turning point where the Tamil communities went towards the armed revolution. Just an opinion, maybe they would have gone either ways, you never know. But you can say, according to like common sense, you can assume, at least politically assume, that if the minority protection is properly given, that turning point and later the political decaying that occurred in Sri Lanka because of the civil war and the political violence would have been prevented. Got it?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Okay, Ketu. Continue. What's the relevancy of democracy when it comes to Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka and the relevancy of democracy. Democracy is not the only form of government that currently exists in the world. Governmental formats such as authoritarian governments, one-party governments, military governments, monarchies, and governments led by religious leaders are a few examples for non-democratic forms of governments. On the other hand, democratic governments also have various forms. Some democratic governments are recognized as liberal democratic governments, while some are identified as social democratic governments. So, democratic countries or governments there?
It should either ways it works.
Okay. Some countries have even incorporated illiberal and authoritarian features with the concept of democracy. Some identify these as positive dictatorships. Other than this, there are also weak democratic models and strong democratic models. Meanwhile, we can identify several reasons as to recognize democracy as the best suited government for Sri Lanka. A strong democratic tradition was started in Sri Lanka in the early 20th century. This included universal franchise, representative democracy, parliamentary democracy, and government changes by public vote as main features. These features have also been strong and continuous in political culture of Sri Lanka since independence. Sri Lanka is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country. Such as a country with a plural society requires governmental format that views such as diversity as a source of strength. In that sense, democracy is the best form of government which provides political pluralism, which is necessary for a plural society with ethnic diversity. The Sri Lankan public have always demonstrated their continuous faith in democratic governance, even through heavy political violence, political crisis, and civil war. The higher percentage of voter turnouts and public participation at elections is the best measure of people's faith in democratic governance. In the past few decades of Sri Lankan history, a few non-democratic political alternatives as well as extremist political agendas were initiated. In 1972 and 88 or 89, Youth Revolution, the Ulam separatist movement by Tamil groups such as Plot, Tello, EPRLF, EROS, etc. However, none of these political agendas received a majority or popular support of Sri Lankan citizens. Sir, should I read the abbreviations of that Plot, Tello, EPRLF and everything?
Skip that. Actually, I gave that as extra reading. Just skip that square and the note continues from the next paragraph.
All right. In contrast with the other countries in the region, Sri Lanka has a high literacy rate as well as a high level of political awareness. Therefore, Sri Lankan citizens are politically vigilant and alert. This can be considered as another reason for democracy to be the best political model for Sri Lanka. Democracy is also the best format to ensure a greater political participation of such citizens. The fundamentals of democracy are also important in terms of family life and social life. This includes tolerance of views of other people and as well as different views. Respects for other faiths and religions, actively listening and respecting the views and beliefs of other people, accepting the views of the majority while not suppressing the views of the minority, collective decision making, and maintaining the ability to be critical. A citizen can incorporate many values into their family life and their social life by following democratic principles. Since the family and the society are consisted of many people, the views of different individuals inevitably differs from one another. Therefore, it is necessary for each person to have the tolerance of views of each other even when they differ. Also, in a plural society, people follow different religions and faiths. It is necessary for people to respect the faiths of each other and actively listen to the beliefs and views of each other. Democratic principles provide the required political and social discipline on this matter. Also, according to the democratic principles, citizens learn to accept the majority view, yet at the same time not to suppress the majority view. It also means people have to make collective decisions as well as be critical when necessary. These skills also support a successful family and social life. As students who study political science under the principles of democracy, it is important to learn how to adopt democratic ways to life within the family, in school, in workplace, and in society. It is also important to convey that it is also important to convey that knowledge to other family members, friends, co-workers, and acquaintances to make the application of democratic principles more broader and more effective.
Right. So isn't this lesson not that hard actually? It's very practical, right? You can see what sort of a journey Sri Lanka has had. Basically, it's a very mixed journey, mixed experience, where um, we have very positive and negative features from both ends. So this is the basic idea. Just to give you in a nutshell this entire thing, Sri Lanka was introduced democracy in 1833 under Colebrook Cameron reforms, and 1931 Donomo reforms is like a landmark because we received universal franchise, and the Sri Lankan population for the first time showed that they are capable of handling democracy and they are mature, politically mature enough to handle such a political responsibility. And following the Salisbury Constitution, we had a lot of democratic features going on. Because there was minority protection, and political violence was not there, and the governments were and political parties were not corrupted reasonably compared to nowadays. And the ethnic conflict, it was there, the intensity was there, but we did not have any violence in terms of that conflict. However, there were some setbacks because we didn't have fundamental rights, and of course the minority protection did not really work, which sort of which sort of developed things to a peak point. In the mid 70s, we faced a turning point. The 70s was like a turning point. First, because of the 72 constitution, which dropped out most of the important democratic concepts, such as minority protection was dropped out, power devolution was not addressed, and the fundamental rights were introduced, but they were not legally enforceable. That's the first reason. Then, secondly, the JVP insurrection, and thirdly, the rise of Tamil armed group in the mid 70s, and of course, in 1978, the second Republican Constitution, which introduced an extremely powerful president, which started a decaying process of democracy in Sri Lanka. So in the mid 80s, 1980s, Sri Lanka started having a civil war following things like um, the Black July, And of course, the second JVP insurrection and the Indulanka Peace Accord and the Indian Army's arrival and the civil war and these things. So after the 80s, we sort of faced a political decaying as our democracy was heavily harmed. But we need to emphasize on the fact that the democracy, after all this, democracy did not die in our country. Rather than democratic features were sort of weakened, that's all. Even during a civil war, people kept turning up to vote. Governments were changed. I mean, 94, UNP government ended, Chandrika came to power. 2001, we had a cohabitation. 2004, then these people came back to power. 2005, Mahinda came to power. All this power transition happened very peacefully, reasonably peacefully, while having a civil war, and the voter turnout was top notch. We always had at least more than 60% people turning out to vote, even when there was a time that voting was basically asking for death at that time. Even at that time, we had about 50% of a voter turnout. So democracy did not die. Democracy had like a setback, and democratic features were weakened during that time. And we have positive features and negative features. Positive features being, of course, us having the cabinet format from back then, and even after 78, not completely deviating from that system. Then us having timely elections from time to time. We've actually had elections, except for in 1982, where they used a referendum to postpone the election. We've always had elections on time. Then the voter turnout, as I explained before, water turnout has always been great since the very first election. Even after that, uh, during heavy political violence, people still turn out to vote. Then things like we reasonably have a judicial independency, reasonably have rule of law, and all the governments have been changed uh, democratically, and we don't have military coups and stuff happening. So those are the bold features. But we do have negative features, that the dropping of the minority protection and not providing the minority protection properly, and then having a civil war, then having armed insurrections in 71, 79, and having like a basically we are basically having very violent insurrections and very violent controlling methods over those. And especially when we were having the war, we used to have the emergency law passed. So under emergency law, the fundamental rights and stuff are quite restricted, and the democratic rule is sort of suspended temporarily when you have emergency law in action. And of course, there are allegations of the human rights violations, war crimes, and all these things. And especially given the fact that given the fact that we had a civil war going on, these kind of allegations and these kind of setbacks in democracy are kind of understandable. Okay. However, we can conclude by saying Sri Lankan citizens have been fond of democracy pretty much since the conception of democracy in Sri Lanka. And despite having some setbacks and some tough times and decaying moments and weakening of democratic features, Sri Lanka's democracy is still going. And compared to other countries in the region, compared to other post-colonies, Sri Lanka has done a reasonably good job protecting our democratic status. Right. Any questions?
Sir, can you say communal representation is like a negative?
Yes, yes. Please mention communal representation as a negative feature because which sort of resulted in the ethnic conflict we had, which resulted in the turning point in the 70s, as well as the decaying point in the 80s. The civil war and the ethnic conflict is one of the biggest setbacks in Sri Lanka's democracy. And of course, you can see that the beginning of that was the communal representation. And of course, we have a text question. Millie, of course, you don't have to mention all these facts. Just mention the important ones. And you don't need to memorize all these. How many pages? Depending on whether they ask this for a 20-mark question. If they ask for a 20-mark question, Millie, you'll have to write more than 4, as you write usually, which means you'll have to combine the democratic experience and the relevancy. right? The two notes, basically what Aksa read and what Ketu read. You have to combine both and talk about both. Mention the historical development and mention the parts, features. If they ask for a 10-mark question, just mentioning them in like short form as a summary would be good enough, right? So Millie, the next class when I'm having like the full day class with you, I'll give you a structure for that. I'll exactly give you a short note with what exactly to remember from this unit. Okay, but I think if you remember the structure, this is a question you can actually think and write. Okay, yeah, I will give you a short note. Right.
Sir,
Yeah.
So basically, when explaining Sri Lanka and its relevancy to democracy, it's basically giving a timeline of the events that happened.
Exactly. That's a very smart interpretation of this today's lesson. It is actually a timeline of Sri Lanka's journey in democracy. Basically, a timeline you have to start from 1833 and explain up to date, mentioning the landmarks in 1931, 1947, the 70s, 80s, and up to date. And of course, mentioning the plus points and the negative points. That's it, 20 out of 20. This is actually one of the favorite areas of professors. So if you write a good answer, you might actually get 20 out of 20. Okay.
Sir, this is kind of like a dumb question.
No, no, it's okay.
But when you were talking about bicameral legislature as like a positive feature, do we mean that it's sort of like more people go into the legislature, or are we talking like specifically like how we had like that?
No, we are talking about the fact that there was an upper house to filter any undemocratic decision made by the lower house. Understand? Because the lower house was consisted of politicians who won elections. They tend to do things for political gain, political advantages, right? And the upper house was there to filter that kind of decisions, especially given the fact that the minorities were worried about Sri Lanka, like Ceylon after independence, having a legislature with an overwhelming Sinhala majority representatives, because it's a Sinhala majority country, so the most of them are going to be Sinhalese. They feared for their rights. That's why the British people incorporated the upper house and said, don't worry, if the lower house passes something that is unfavorable and discriminating to the minorities, the upper house is there. They are not politicians. They are not looking at votes. They will be there to filter out that kind of undemocratic decisions. Understand? That's the basic idea of us having a bicameral legislature. And, when we talk about unicameral and bicameral, this is one of the advantages we talk about having a bicameral legislature. The upper house can filter any undemocratic decisions made by the lower house. That was the whole point. We had a upper house in the Seoul Medical School.
Sir, can you mention that those 15 people we had to the Senate?
You can mention that, but that's actually going little bit into too much details. You don't have to go that far. Just mentioning
Okay.
that would
Cool.
Okay. Right. I think our time is over on Zoom. So if you have any questions, WhatsApp me. Yeah. Okay. And you all can watch the recording. I'll send you the recording. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay.